in mind, as well as the fact that the microphones are really sensitive. So any rustling or moving about in the room will be really loud for the people online. So just bear that in mind too. Microphones are sensitive. I think those are my two practical things. We'll get to the Q&A after the presentations. And there will be a chat that will pop up for online viewers. There'll be a chat and we'll look at questions and take those questions online as well as in the room. So without further ado, just introduce our speakers for today. The first being Dr. Marisela Gutierrez Lopez, who is a senior research associate here at the Bristol Digital Futures Institute. We have Dr. Merve Alanyali, who is the head of data science, academic partnerships, and research at Allianz Personal, as well as Kieran Billingham, who's a senior data scientist at Allianz Personal as well. So without further ado, I think I'll pass over to Marisela, who's going to start the presentation.
Yes. So, well, hi everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you, Jess, for the lovely introduction. And I am delighted to be here to talk about our project, our sociotechnical approach to reimagining machine learning explanations. And as we all know, AI has been increasingly embedded in everyday life, and there are like really profound questions about the knowledge, the power, and the inequalities that this technology produces. And there is particular interest on how machine learning is being adopted by companies, by governments to make decisions, especially because of the lack of accountability and transparency that those systems can have, and how they are being used for making decisions that can have a deep impact on society. And the thing is, like, if we cannot really understand how the models and the data are working, then how can we interrogate the consequences of these systems? So this project starts with this premise that it's really urgent to interrogate what machine learning decisions are being made, how it's being used, and the fact that we are here today speaks of that concern. And it also speaks that it's not really easy. So this kind of work requires a lot of collaboration, requires new ways of working. And today I am really delighted to be joined by my colleagues from LV and Allianz to talk about this work. And basically we have been exploring new ways of working together to explore how can we put together knowledge from across the academic sector and across the commercial sector. How can we put together collaboration to figure out new ways to explain to figure out what makes my machine learning explainable, in which context, for who, and also like who's responsible for it. So just kind of like a very brief kind of overview of today. Merve will be talking about the partnership between UOB, well, the University of Bristol and Allianz. And then Kieran and I will be talking about the fieldwork. So we're basically like the different forms of knowledge that came together in this project. And then finally, all of us will be reflecting on the outcomes, so what we learned together. So I will start by giving the floor to Merve.
Thank you very much, Marisela, and hello all. Thank you so much for coming here today, and thank you for our online viewers as well, and thank you so much for inviting us today to the BDFI seminar series. So like Jess kind of introduced, I'm Merve. I am from LV General Insurance, which became part of wider Allianz Group in 2020. So you'd basically see both branding over the slides, just to, you know, avoid the confusion. We're basically the same. So we're a general insurance company. If you don't know about us, we mainly sell insurance like car, home, pet, a small book of travel. And I've joined Allianz Personal 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago. And if you came and asked me, say 10 years ago, that I would end up working for an insurance company, I probably would have said, you've gone mad. This is so boring. This is not going to happen. Little did I know that I was so wrong, because insurance is data scientist heaven, especially Allianz Personal. There's so many different challenges, so many different problems, and also my background is in data science, so it is a really, really interesting space to be, with a lot of potential. But what I personally like being part of Allianz Personal, the data science team, just to give you a bit of flavour of our team to start with, what makes us special. To start off, we're a central team. We're a central team in the Allianz personal space. Together with the support functions, we give support to all the different business functions that with their data needs. So that makes the problem quite interesting personally for me, because it means that we get to work with different types of data, different types of challenges, different groups of stakeholders. So basically from claims, pricing, marketing, underwriting, you name it. So that makes the problem very, very dynamic. So this is the biggest thing probably, like among the other things. We're fairly mature team. It's been nearly 7 years, if not more, since the team inception. And we are around 55. We have some new starters, so probably pushing to 60. I haven't counted them in this number. And we're a group of data scientists, data engineers, data hunters, and data analysts. Another thing that, if I say so myself, I'm not biased at all, that makes us special is we put machine learning into practice. We make our models available live to our stakeholders, so impacting decisions. So since the team inception, we've influenced more than 50 decision points across the business. And the team is split across 3 sites. So if you're wondering about our team split, so London, I'm based in London. We have an office in Bournemouth that has a data science team, but also the office we have in Merchant Ventures building, so University of Bristol campus. So we're based there. And actually, that's the second biggest group we have. It's the competition between London and Kieran is based in the Bristol office full time. So where do we focus our efforts as a data science team? So as a team, we have 3 main pillars. It's delivery, technical excellence, and research innovation. So delivery is what we call our use cases with our stakeholders across the business. And technical excellence, it's obviously quite self-explanatory, is what we ensure with all of our use cases and our projects, like research projects. And when it comes to research and innovation, we have, in a way, 2 routes. One, the internal projects that we run using the team's capabilities and resources, but also the collaborative research projects like we'll be covering today. 5 years ago, we have started our collaborative partnership with University of Bristol, and this is taken from the press release. And the main aim of that partnership is to work together to make advancements in the field of data science by sharing knowledge, skills, and opportunities. Fast forward to 5 years. We opened the office with only 4 members of our team physically based here. We have more than 15 members, nearly 20 members of the team based in the Bristol office now. Just to cover, so this is a selection of what we've achieved over the course of 5 years in the partnership space. Obviously, research is at the heart of it. Collaborative research. So it's basically at every levels, from MSc, PhD, postdoc, applying for grants together, you name it. And one thing when I talk about our collaboration externally, outside Allianz Personal Law, University of Bristol, people usually say, oh, you know, you collaborated with computer science, surely, just that, or stats and maths, the usual suspects. And I said, well, yeah, we do that, but we also do beyond that. We put a lot of emphasis on multidisciplinary collaborative research. So we work very closely with BDFI, of course, that's why we're here. Also business schools, social sciences. So we have a big focus around that. So we've run more than 20 research projects over the course of 5 years, like I said, at every different level. I am proud to announce that we have a co-authored paper accepted at CHI 2024. Let me remember that Conference of Human-Computer Interaction, I want to say, if I remember the acronym correctly. So the one in Hawaii in May. So it was a really proud moment for us. So, like I said, we've linked with a diverse set of schools and institutes across the University of Bristol. We have co-developed a master's program in data science, and again, another proud moment. In February, 16 of our colleagues have successfully graduated. Colleagues in Allianz Personal graduated from that program. As I mentioned, our team grew. Our team physically based in the University of Bristol campus grew from 4 to nearly 20. We have a continuous knowledge share pipeline set up. I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So we'll be delivering guest lectures and talks with the university, but also in turn, we have academic speakers monthly, if not more, coming to our team virtually, usually, to sharing their experience, talking about their projects too. We're hosting MSc interns, which we're also using as a hiring pipeline, which we found to be quite successful as well. So like I said, this is only a selection of it, but I think it would be very safe to say over the course of 5 years, going strong. We have established a strong Allianz personal presence and raised the awareness as us as a team of data scientists, basically a team of data science. And it's actually a really cool place to work for an insurance company, but especially Allianz personal. So, but enough said. So actions speak louder than words. I'll stop now and I'll hand over to Marisela to kickstart what the project is about and to give it deeper in there.
Well, thank you, Merve. And I think it's kind of like give you a really kind of good idea of what is Allianz doing and how it comes together with the university. And within that kind of partnership and that collaboration, I'm going to introduce the Explaining AI Decision-Making project that we have been working together for a bit over 3 years. But before I start, just a few words about Explainable AI. So Explainable AI is the focus of this project in a way. And but just kind of like for those of you who are not really familiar with it, Explainable AI or XAI or explainability is basically often positioned as a solution for social, ethical, and regulatory concerns over the use of machine learning. And in this formulation, the explanation of the models is understood either as a computational challenge where we have to find, how can we explain the inner mechanisms of the work of the model? So basically how it actually works. And it can also be a communication challenge. So how do we explain these really complex technical procedures in ways that can be understood by people using the model or by regulators to understand what the models are doing and so on. And clearly, Explainable AI and these two technical and communication challenges are very important, and they are necessary steps for understanding what the models are doing. But this project has a very different starting point. So, while Explainable AI demands attention to the technical complexity of the model, so what is happening in the model and in the data, what we ask is what happens if we decenter the models as the object of explanation and then look at social practices. So what we are doing is that we are broadening the scope or the object of explanation from the model into what we are calling machine learning practice. So we just use this kind of like as a shorthand, let's say, to refer to the range of organizational practices that shape machine learning and where machine learning comes to be and to being used, and also how this kind of like there are these diverse relational networks that exist inside the organization that cannot really reduce to the model. So the models are in there, but it's not the only thing. And this basically sociotechnical approach, this alternative approach that we are using is demanding us to look at what is happening inside the organization in order to explain and understand machine learning. So having said that, in the project, we set to explore this empirically. So I'm going to be talking about that today. But before that, I will introduce the project itself because there were more to it than only the collaboration with Allianz. So as I said, the project started in 2020. We started, we are going to end. Actually, we are in the last month. And this project has been co-founded by the University of Bristol and LV and Allianz. The principal investigator of the project is Professor Susan Halford, and I have been the researcher working all across these years. And basically what we set in this project is to reimagine explainable AI, or what makes machine learning explainable, in 2 ways. And we had 2 research strands. One was an organizational ethnography, which happened inside LV, And another is a co-produced research with 2 community groups in Bristol that are Black Southwest Network and Northwest Media Center. And these 2 groups are also partners with the BDFI. And basically, we co-produce initiatives to explore what makes machine learning explainable from the perspective of different data publics and usually people who are not involved in conversations about AI. So these 2 strands of our research had different timelines, different priorities, different people involved. But I really want to acknowledge here that the project was larger than the work with LB, and also to, in a way, open the invitation to watch the space, as later this year we will start to disseminate or continue disseminating the outcomes with the community groups, which I think is also a fantastic output of this project. So I will start by talking about the work, the organizational ethnography. So basically, I was embedded inside LV and for 3 years, and I was based in the data science team. And from there, I was exploring how different people were explaining machine learning. And as Merve already said, there were many models. There are like very mature examples of machine learning. So we had like really kind of like a really interesting space for us as qualitative researchers to go and explore. And being on the data science team meant that I was also framed on the team that Merve was talking about. And from there, I moved across the organization. So I was speaking with people on the operational side, so claims and fraud, both people using the models, the handlers that I'm going to talk later, but also with managers, team leaders, with executives. So basically, I went across the organization, different teams, but also talking with different people on different positions. And it's more traditional, let's say, part of the ethnography. So it allowed me to, of course, collect many interesting accounts of what is happening inside the business and have a really kind of interesting perspective of what's happening with the models. But actually, there was an extra layer that I think that made this project really interesting, and also for the collaboration. And is that we were inspired by the Engage program of STS, that is Science and Technology Studies. And basically, what proposes this Engage program is that the social scientists are also doing some doing inside the field. So we are not distant observers, but we are also actioning the research and working in close collaboration with the partners. So in that sense, what the study was co-produced. So we didn't arrive with fixed research questions or fixed ideas of what we wanted to have out of the project. We, as the social scientists, arrived to have conversations with our partners, which in this case were the data science team who were involved in the project. And by having those conversations, we actually started to identify things that matter to both of us. So the matters of care, the matters of concern in this project, and we started to work together on them, which was, of course, very interesting, but also it give us the guide on where to look inside the organization to figure out what was happening with the models. And here I also want to acknowledge in this kind of co-production and conversation, I also want to acknowledge the work of Kate Byron, and she's a PhD student who was also doing ethnography at the same time as me, and her research was looking at a different direction, but we were still kind of like being at the same time on the field, and I think her research was really influential to our findings, so I really want to acknowledge her work here. And yeah, another thing that made the ethnography very unique is that when we were kind of having these conversations, we figured out that we didn't need to be, as I said, like distant observers, but we can actually intervene in the field. So basically, we had like a really interesting space for doing things together, and we will be talking about that in the presentation. But I think that is quite unusual for industry and academia. Certainly, social scientists, we go do observations and then leave and do our thing and then return on a presentation. But actually, there was a lot of collaboration and shaping together what came out of the project all the way. So I'm going to go and start talking about some of the findings. And of course, 3 years of work are very difficult to summarize. But I'm just going to give you a brief idea of some of the findings, and then we can move into the conversation of what came out of it. So as a part of the ethnography, a group of people that I sat with is the people who use the models, which inside of the Alliance is the handlers. And basically, I sat with 26 handlers that have very highly specialized roles within the insurance. So they have like a very particular function inside the business. And they are also customer facing, which means that they are the interface between the business and the customer. And the handlers, as Merve mentioned, like had like different models introduced at different decision points. And I'm not going to kind of be very specific in this presentation, but just for you to know that there are models, there are handlers that make decisions with those models, and it depending on the role is how they use the model. But across the board, they use it as a part of the work, as a routine part of the work. They use machine learning, and they decide what happens with it. So how do we action this prediction? So thinking about that and thinking about all the company investment into machine learning and all the push that has been into using models, when I sat to the handlers, was like, well, how do you explain this model? How do you understand what is going on with machine learning? And it was really interesting that when I was sitting with the handlers, what they were telling me was that they are constantly using their own knowledge and expertise to judge the models and the model predictions. So this was not just in a procedural way, it was actually in a deep conceptual way. So the handlers explain machine learning through organizational practices or the operational knowledge that they need about insurance or the sense of responsibility of the customers. And that's how they talk about machine learning. And this is very important because it's a total shift if we think about explainable AI, where we talk about accuracy or we think about features and what feature has the most impact or things like that. But here what we are seeing is not about any of that cognitive understanding of the model. The weight of explanations, if we look at the machine learning practice that I mentioned, is on the work and it's on the everyday business rather than on the technical mechanisms. That is quite a big change from where we started. And also I want to mention that this kind of like shift to the social side of the explanation happened even if the handlers had a technical explanation. So if there were local explanations or kind of like something very technical that they could use, those explanations very quickly became entangled with other logics. So actually, it was not the only thing to consider. It was something that they wanted, that they appreciated, but they were like part of many other things. Just to give you an example, the handlers really spoke on how they made decisions after, for example, speaking to a customer, or they spoke with somebody in the business. And based on what they heard from that other person, then they used the machine learning recommendation, and that's how they explained it. So what we are seeing here is that the way the handlers explain machine learning is not constituted by the models and the data, but is constituted by the various actors that are inside the business and also at very specific moments in the company. So what we are arguing is that by looking at the machine learning practice, we need to look at the many hands that are involved in the insurance process, and we need to, we are going to find that the explanations are multiple, that they are situated, and that they are also a product of the knowledge that they have. So this was kind of like the case of the handlers. And then when I, let's say, went, as I mentioned, across the business and started to zoom out the findings, what we started to see is that different people had different ways of explaining the models. So this was like the case of the handlers, but other people had other ways of doing this. So what we are talking is that we saw an ecology of explanations inside Allianz that basically is required to explain machine learning. And in that sense, what is explained to whom, why, when, all of those questions is multiple and situated. There is not just one single explanation. And in doing this, again, what we were doing is disrupting that idea, like we can have this technical solution to explain machine learning. Actually, we need to look at the whole ecology. And of course, the technical explanations are part of this ecology, but we need to look at the whole in order to explain what are the models doing, and especially if we think about transparency and accountability, looking at models is not enough. And by doing also these explanations, something very interesting that started to happen is that there was a sense of like, okay, so we need different knowledge, different expertise to do these explanations, which meant that there was a sense of responsibility that started to shift from the data science, like we are holding these models and we need to explain them is our responsibility within the business to other people who were also involved in shaping the models, taking into being part of that responsibility and those conversations about machine learning. So the handlers, the business managers, the team leaders suddenly also became part of that conversation. And by doing this and having these conversations, because of course these are the findings that I'm presenting all very neatly packaged, but still was kind of like an ongoing conversation for many years, we started to find these kind of opportunities for intervention. So what could we do differently? So if we know that it's not only technical models, that this is not like let's say I go and code a prototype and we put it there and then you have a different approach. So how do we do things differently together? And by talking about explanations in more multiple and relational ways, we started to open the door for also co-production. So actually, Kieran and I worked really closely to organize a set of workshops with the handlers and also with data scientists and team leaders to rethink explanation together. And with this, I was also very inspired by the work of Lucy Kimmel and Sarah Pink on how we can use qualitative research and design. So basically, we were using our own findings as evidence to have those conversations in the business. So it was kind of like a way of making like the qualitative research productive in different ways, let's say. So when we were running these workshops, two of the findings that I found really interesting was one that the handlers wanted to have more porosity with the data science team. So that meant that they really wanted to see what were they doing and like, oh, like you should come. And they were like inviting the data scientists, like you should come and sit with me and see how I'm using the models and we can have this conversation. So it was kind of like from going from one direction of the data scientist produces the models to how can we have conversations between who produces the models and who uses them. Another interesting finding was that the handlers wanted to go from like the passive recipients of explanations, so something that comes to them, to actually being active agents in producing those explanations. So they were saying like, how can we have a more active role in the shaping of machine learning inside the company? And in making the case, when they were like we were discussing, this is a really nice quote from one of the data scientists that mentions how like in a way he starts by problematizing the one-sided approach. So it has always been like the data scientists explain to others, but that seems that we can change, and then goes into say like how if we invite the handlers, in this case, that are the experts of using the models, into the conversations. And I think something really interesting of this quote, and maybe something that we will discuss later in the presentation, is there is kind of like this idea, kind of like, and this conversation on how can we shift the innovation from being the data scientists producing technical things that then go into the business to people who use the models having ideas that then are become conversations and maybe prototypes with people who develop the technology. So it's a total flip around. But yeah, with that, I will just finish and give the floor to Kieran.
Thanks very much, Marisela. Thank you for having me. I'm Kieran, so I'm a senior data scientist at LV, was LV, now Allianz, and I've had the pleasure of working with Marisela over the last year and a half or so on integrating this research into our business and how we work. So without ado, I guess I'll go on to this. We've spoken a lot about how we are working with the business and how we actually add a lot to the business, and Merve's spoken a lot about how we're at a lot of decision points, but that doesn't come without challenges. And actually, as a team of AI practitioners, we have kind of two major customer groups. We have our external customers, who are our policyholders. They can be brokers we work with, they are regulators, in some cases they're media who feed back into us, and our ability to communicate with them is really quite cut off because we work in a highly competitive, highly regulated industry. And even if we could talk to them directly, if I could ring a policyholder and say, do you want to talk about machine learning? what's the chances that they're going to be AI literate or even interested in what I have to say? And what I could end up doing is actually perpetuating the negative media stereotypes that AI has by saying, why is this random guy from my insurance company ringing me to talk about machine learning? I didn't know they were using machine learning. That's scary. So luckily, the kind of community group side of the researchers really give us some incredible foundations for building all that work, and it's something we're still very much working on. But we're much closer now with the BDFI being our kind of gap to the community groups, to getting close to our external customers. But the focus of this talk is more our internal customers, so the people we work with day to day, so like the claims teams, the fraud teams, pricing. We work with loads of different people in the business. And an issue that we have and a lot of businesses have is that getting technical teams to talk to non-technical teams is difficult. We speak in different languages, we have different ways of working. In insurance especially, it's an old business where you have underwriters make this decision, pricing make this decision, claims make this decision, and now you're saying, hey, we're new, we're fresh, we want to change how you make good decisions, and that can be quite threatening, especially when you have media perpetuating this idea that AI is here to steal our jobs, not a tool for us all. So yes, whilst we do work with these teams really closely, we are always slightly on the back foot because we're not people, we're computer people, and it can be really difficult to start those communication channels. So kind of what the BDFI does for us is it gives us this gap. I've kind of bridged the gap, a bit cheesy, where you have a neutral party coming in whose job is purely to research, observe, and get onto the bones of what's actually going on, without putting any pressure on either party that you don't know enough about machine learning, you're doing your job wrong. We don't know enough about your job, we don't know enough about business, we're doing our job wrong. And really setting this neutral playing field where Marisela can get her ethnography, got that all right, and give us a really good idea of what the business is doing and how these relationships are actually working and how they're being productive and how they're not being productive. So with that, kind of, we've spoken a lot about the methodology that Marisela used, but like, what did we as a business get out of that and how have we implemented that? So we spoke before about how handlers did want some form of explainability. They wanted to know more about how the models worked. Also, they had their own ways of dealing with the models and talking to customers and kind of regulating how they took advice from these models. Something we've done is we've built and launched this internal explainability tool, which kind of puts more power back into the handler's hands to say, hey, look, you're getting this prediction from the model. We'd like you to use it to make an informed decision, but we also appreciate that you have an awful lot of domain knowledge and expertise that we cannot replicate with a 1 or 0. So what we want to do is provide you all the tools and evidence to help support our case for the model's case, so that you can go back and forth and do your job and really empower you to use your expertise for that. That's come in a while ago for our sort of like claims and fraud handlers, and we're seeing a much better uptick of, sort of models since that's come in. But there's also this idea that not everybody wants that level of detail, so that's fine. Don't use it, rely on your expertise. All we ask is that you use it when it's there. The great thing about that is it's now in demand by areas across the business, so everyone's heard about it in one area of the business, and what usually happens is that goes like wildfire across and everybody wants your time and wants it put in. And now there's lots of use cases for how we can help our colleagues in pricing or marketing really make use of understanding the inner workings of these machine learning models to get better explainability and transparency for their customers as well as ours. The next one then is this collaboration and multidisciplinary team. So traditionally, when we're setting up projects, we would have some data scientists and data engineers, and we'd probably talk to the business leaders, because they're the ones that are the decision makers in their area, and that's fair enough. Most businesses do that, but what actually we kind of realized through this is that our end users, our consumers of our models, know an awful lot more about how they want to use these models than we probably were giving them credit for in the past. So what we've done is we've kind of widened our net when we're casting these teams, and we make sure now that everybody who is part of that decision chain is represented when we're building these new products out. And that means that we have these like co-designers that are closing up our feedback loop, and we're getting models coming out that are easier to integrate, are getting improved much quicker, and we have end users who feel like they're part of the process and they feel empowered to use them. The next one then is enhanced knowledge sharing. So we did a lot of work before and kind of, it was very prescriptive data scientist explains, like we said. And that worked a little bit, but handlers would say, well, is this really my job? Do I really need to understand all of this? I don't think I need to understand the workings of gradient boosting in order to make my decision. And we said, okay, well, that's fair enough. Maybe you don't, but you are consumers of these models. And a lot of you are, what's the word? Right. No, sorry, data curators. You got me halfway there. So like you create the data that gets fed back into the model. So actually, it's really important that you do understand how the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis impact the future iterations of these models. So we say, here's the basic training we expect you to understand because this is what suits your role. And that varies depending on where you sit in the chain. So for example, a claims handler needs to know slightly less about a model than a fraud handler would, because a fraud handler's job is to interrogate. So naturally they need to know more. We've also kind of realized that people have a massive range of interests. So we might have some claim handlers that, yes, they don't need to know lots about it, but they'd actually really be quite interested to cross-skill. So we want to provide more opportunities for them to do that. So there's a lot more optional learning modules now on our site to cross-skill and get more involved in our team. We also kind of upped how much information we put out to the business and get back from the business. Things like data science forums where people would present on just any topic really that they've been looking into and get the feedback from the business. And we've had quite a lot of good ideas generated from the business for that. So these are kind of the changes that have really improved our team and on the inside. And then we're kind of looking a bit more on the sort of on the out. So from sort of the LV being pulled into Allianz, so how's it now impacting everybody else? So the top one is the ethical framework. So we see ourselves very much as the leaders in responsible and ethical AI in Allianz, and we're probably pretty far ahead of most of our competition, if I say so myself. Merve doesn't shout at me. But that's all very well and good. We're leading, but how do we get that out? Allianz has over 125 million customers across the world, and how do we make sure that the investment that we're making into responsible AI actually improves all of them? You know, it doesn't just improve our customers here in the UK. So we actually contribute massively to Allianz's global AI and ethics framework, which has really helped raise the bar across all entries. And we've really grown to be a respected leader in this space with members of our team speaking at in different entities across the world, which is really, really cool. The next one there's regulatory innovation. So it's no shock that this technology has outpaced regulators and governments, and really they're kind of trying to play catch up now. And not only has the technology moved on, but businesses have caught up a lot quicker than regulators have. So now, as an insurance company heavily regulated by the FCA, they're now coming to us to say, look, you guys are doing this really well. How should we go about regulating you and your colleagues in other industries? So we've actually answered multiple calls for information from them around ways in which they want to help regulate this industry. We're really hoping that will kind of influence the future of AI ethics in the UK, because the FCA as a leading regulator does kind of set the pace for a lot of other ones. The next one is a creative workshop. So we've kind of stolen these, Marisela, I'm afraid, and adopted them as our own. For me personally, it's really difficult to run workshops with colleagues, and especially when you have cross-collaborative teams, because nobody wants to upset anybody's feelings. Everybody works very closely together. We have a very productive relationship. You don't want to upset claims because they'll start throwing stuff at our models. They don't want to upset us because we'll stop making them. But actually, you need somebody sometimes to be devil's advocate. And the methodology that Marisela used, we had these extreme scenarios. So you'd have a board like this, and you'd have one person who was incredibly positive about what was happening and one person who's been incredibly negative. And it gave us a really good bouncing place to have these discussions. And we actually got some really honest conversations out of them, even with people that probably wouldn't have been that honest prior to being on that call with each other, out of kindness, not out of anything else. But it's really allowed us to strip back the politics that play in the business and get people together to kind of co-design things and really take ownership of what they want these products to look like. And it's really exciting. So yeah, I guess this is where I'll end it, is that we started this project really trying to flip this tile in our responsible AI matrix, whatever that is. And that's where the investment was supposed to go to, and that's what we wanted to see improvement in. But actually, by investing in this one area, we've seen a huge change across our whole responsible AI framework. Actually, everything that's light blue, so over half of our tiles there, have seen some improvement one way or other through this research. And whether that is a direct consequence of Marisela getting involved in the business and getting involved in conversations that were probably not related to your initial stream of interest, but actually were interesting and kind of powered off of it, or whether that's because either myself or other people that got to work with Marisela have kind of switched back on that part of their brain that says, hang on a minute, I too can read and research, and I can challenge the status quo, which you kind of chuckle at, but it can be very difficult in a heavily regulated industry to want to push a status quo. It took us years and years to get the FCA to let us use XGBoost. So the idea of using something different is quite scary to a lot of people. And being able to kind of flip this one tile is allow people to go, oh, hang on a minute, if we can change this, why can't we do more on continuous monitoring? Why can't we think about human-centric design a little bit more? And then it's kind of ricocheting out now. So we have work that's already been invested in fairness and bias mitigation, accountability and governance, that's kind of been moved as well. I probably should flip that tile. And everything is getting more attention because we've moved one. It's the idea that like we've started to move this boulder, and now it's really got momentum behind it, and it's a really exciting place for us to be. So thank you. And Merve, going to start for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. And I just really want to reflect on everything we discussed and brought it back to a bit more general, what this project enabled us to do, but also like this partnership. So as Kieran really nicely laid out, that was a huge improvement on our internal processes. So that's without a doubt. But for me, one very significant thing about this collaboration is how we worked. We're a team. I mean, we is like Marisela is so well, and same holds for Kate as well. So really well embedded within our team that we worked together collaboratively from the get-go. We were like, we're a team. We're working hands-on on it together from different parts, different expertise. Everyone brings different things on the table, but that level of collaboration was, for me, is what made it so different. Like I said, from the scoping through to the very end, I mean, it's quite sad there's only 1 month left in this project, but I have some exciting things to share. So, but that was, I think, one of the most striking bits, because that enabled us not to just, start at the beginning. Here's a problem. Like none of us were, here's the problem, I want this. We were very open-minded. We scoped it together, worked on it together. So that basically created this continuous knowledge share throughout the project, rather than, a few milestones, a few touch points here and there. And that enabled us to bring a lot of impact back to the business. So there's the tangible stuff like we've done, like the improvement on our internal processes that we can, link and make a huge list. But there's also a whole bag of positive impact that it made, which we cannot count, we cannot measure, which is a bit like change of mindset. So, Kieran a bit touched on that a bit, but it's so hard to quantify. But I can see it for myself. I could see it in Kieran. I could see it with basically everyone who worked quite closely with Kate and Marisela. We're not social scientists in the data science team, but that expertise was brought in, and it brought like a really fresh way of thinking. So I remember at the meetings, Marisela and Kate would bring their own way of thinking, their own viewpoint, and that was really, really refreshing to see. And it, in a way, taught us that way of thinking. Obviously, we're not experts in the area, but that has a huge, huge, huge impact about that we cannot measure, but definitely does worth reflecting on. And also that level of collaboration, that way of working is reflected on the way we're collaborating with the University of Bristol. So it's almost, this project created the blueprints of a perfect collaboration to do with the university. So with our other projects that we're collaborating with our academic partners, we're trying to replicate this way of interaction as much as we can, because the impacts that it brought us, it's basically like the best way of collaborating, and the outcomes, the positive impacts, is basically exceeds what we planned for and what we could probably imagine. So that like I mentioned, created this enduring reciprocal value generation for, I hope I wouldn't be wrong to say, for both parties, Marisela, for both sides, but also is in a way a great poster child internally for us as a data science team. It's also a way to show that our academic partners are like an extended arm of our team, and if the business needs support, we can just pull in support from our academic partners. So we created this network of academic institutions and experts with the data science team, because that's how the partnership initially started. But that doesn't end there, and we can basically pull in that support. So that, and showing it with a great example, led us to create new avenues as a data science team to support the wider business, how to leverage this network. And also, mind you, it's again, like I said, one of the other reasons why it's a great poster child. Yes, it's a collaborative project, a three-pronged project with the university, community groups, and Allianz Personal. But if you zoom into the Allianz Personal side, it's also a cross-functional project with the data science team and the claims team. So all of that, we learned a lot. We also sparked a lot of interesting questions. So it basically is keeping widening the horizon of our research and innovation landscape. So one thing we have done this year, as like I said, our partnership is 5 years old, going strong. As part of AZP UOB Partnership 2.0, we picked a theme, a research theme for this year, which is based on this great work of Marisela and also Kate, and it's human machine teaming. So now we're actively scoping new projects, spinning on projects in multiple ways. So it's all based on this project. So this also is a great example how it opened up, broadened our minds and vision to build up on this work. So I personally, and us as a data science team from the Allianz Personal, we learned a lot from this project, and I enjoyed massively, and I personally cannot wait what is to come in the collaboration. And I'll pass it to Marisela to end there.
Yeah, just kind of like a very brief conclusion, because and thank you for sharing your reflections on the project. And I guess what I want to conclude is by saying, like, I started by talking how explainable AI is limited, is inevitably limited, inevitably partial. But on the other side, it plays a very powerful role, as Merve was saying, on raising questions about how decisions are made in organizations. So I think that is a really good learning point of this project. And also showcase or kind of highlight how having an engaged and interdisciplinary project can actually help make space for social researchers, who we usually are kind of on the side of these conversations. But actually, by having like a focus on machine learning practice or co-design or whatever it is, we can actually be able to take our own responsibility for what is going on with machine learning. And I think that is very important for social scientists, that we are able to critique, but also to shape what is happening in terms of transparency and accountability. And having said that, I think that is a very good point to end this talk, just by saying on how encouraging it is to see what happens when we widen the point of explanation from looking at a model that only a few can explain and understand into wider conversations like the one we have today. So thank you.
Super cool. Thank you so much for, as I had already imagined, a very thought-provoking presentation. We're a little bit over time, but I think that's partially to do with starting late. For those of you online, hopefully there will be a Q&A tab that will emerge where you can insert your questions, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. We definitely want to make time for questions here as well, after which we'll have a break for some tea and coffee outside. Does anyone have a question maybe from the room to start? Yes.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. My name's Alistair. I'm from Airbus. I've also worked with BDFI and Bristol University. It's very interesting your sort of your findings around that ecological perspective, actually, People are making decisions not just on the basis of machine learning outputs, but specialist domain knowledge and things like that. So I guess my question is, where do you see the boundary of XAI actually being? Because there's got to be at some point where actually it's more looking at wider questions of explainable processes, explainable organizations, hierarchies, social networks within those organizations. So where do you think that kind of boundary stops? When do things stop being about explainable AI and just more about how you make complex decisions in complex organizations, often with specialist or domain knowledge?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it's kind of like a slippery kind of like, and it has been conversations throughout these years to figure out where is the boundary. And at the end, we came to the conclusion from the research side is that maybe the boundaries, that's why we talk about machine learning practice. So explainable AI exists as a part of that practice of those things that happen inside the organization, and is very important and it should be there. But it's only part of it. So the boundary is like, in a way, explainable AI is part of the wider network, and we need to look at both. So there doesn't need to be a specific boundary where it kind of like breaks and suddenly becomes something else. But actually, we need to think about the practice, and that's actually like that's our way of operationalizing. There's a little word to say, but you know, like how do we know what we are looking? And the answer for us was looking at machine learning practice. So the models are there and they are an important part, but they are not the center. It's everything that happens around it. And in those conversations, then the point of explainable AI becomes clear. So for example, the handler said, like, I really want to know what is happening here. So I really need you to give me an XAI. Well, they didn't ask for it like that, but they were talking like, we need to know what is happening with the model, because then I will take it and use it with my own logics of the business. So it's kind of like there is like the lines will always be blurred, and that's why we're talking about machine learning practice. I'm sorry if I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but yeah, really happy to continue the conversation.
Online. Hello, yes.
Thank you very much for the talk, amazing talk. This is very similar, related to the previous question. With the new regulations, the AI Act and the UK AI Act are coming, where do you think this comes into place? Because there are clear guidelines for explainability, transparency. What is the limit? Is the model that has come from the data scientist, or is the actual final explanation to the user?
That is a really good question. And I think that is something that maybe we can all kind of chip into. But I think it's kind of like that kind of goes to show the importance of both and the importance of the collaboration. Because actually in, like, for example, with the FCA, we had a few conversations about regulation. And we were basically feeding the findings of the machine learning practice into regulation. So it's something that can speak to each other. And the regulation can speak to the importance of the social aspect, not only on the technical side, but maybe you want to say something about the FCA and
not necessarily FCA, but more like, you know, which one would become more prevalent, than just to echo what you were saying, that the balance is important. I mean, what we haven't covered here today is everything else we've done, for example, like internally, like Kieran touched on it slightly, the technical side, the explainability package that we've built internally. So what we're trying to do from our team side, kind of move the technical part of, you know, not just the regulations, is basically doing the right thing, giving the information, the right level of information, and what Marisela's project helped us with how to communicate that. So I would say it would be equally as important in terms of regulations, but also beyond that, just doing the right thing.
I guess I would just add that I would be very surprised if any new regulation came in the UK for explainable responsible AI that we were not ahead of. I think the only companies who are really going to be impacted by these new regulatory kind of like rules are going to be those that aren't doing enough now and aren't acting in their customers' best interests. And I think, especially insurance, because we're so heavily regulated in other ways, we kind of already have this like proxy regulation in place. So I think for us, it's not going to have much of an impact at all. If anything, it might give us some extra guidance on how we should present that for auditors, etc. I don't think it'll actually change many of our practices.
Yep, Daniel?
Oh, so did you want to go
There's
into
nothing
online?
else, you're good to go.
Okay. This is kind of a question for Marisela, but others can join in as well. It's a question about ethnography. For those of us that have been involved in ethnography over the years, one of the challenges of doing ethnography in organizational settings is trying to sort of demonstrate our kind of impact and usefulness, those sorts of things, right? Because it's sometimes seen as slightly less tangible, perhaps, than perhaps a quantitative approach where you can say, okay, this is the number, so this is what you need to do, etc. So, what were the challenges here? Did you find that was a challenge here, that you needed to somehow sort of be able to articulate at the start, this is what the value of the approach would be, or as you went on through the project, was it a challenge to kind of, demonstrate or prove, or I don't even know what the right term is, but, in some way show that you were having a positive impact?
I think that's one of the advantages of presenting a project that is already very kind of like neatly packaged. That you kind of like, oh, well, there were some things, but yes, I think there was like a massive challenge at the beginning, especially because we open up with the explainable. We are here to talk about explainable AI, so that was the card that we have in our hands. But we were actually thinking about ethnography. So a lot of the conversations were like at the beginning was, oh, and how are we going to measure the impact, and what prototype are you going to produce, and when are we going to implement it into the business? So there was kind of like a slow process of having conversations on what doing ethnography actually meant, and also like the slowness of the research. So I remember conversations on the first kind of like interviews that I started to make, where they were telling me like, you are going so slowly, we want to do this now. I'm like, well, yes, but we have to wait. And so I think that's why having something like co-production was really helpful, because it was then again not us coming with our research agenda and then just trying to, get the data and getting out of the business. But how can we shape this together in a way that also makes sense to you, and in a way that also is valuable for you? So along the way, with the from early findings, we started to do things with them. So organizing a workshop, or thinking about how can we create these templates or these frameworks, or things that we could do together that were very tangible based on the evidence that we were gathering in the field. So it was a process, but at the beginning, it was just kind of landing on Mars, like saying, oh, you're here with our ethnography, and like, okay. So there was like obviously the openness from the beginning, but it took a while to define what that meant in this project.
Well, one thing I can add, I mean, feel free to disagree, Marisela. You did the interviews and we've gone there with all of them. But I mean, I suppose, again, like being there, like co-creating it together, because we were like taking some of that in our hands and producing some useful tools. Basically having a big input from Marisela in those tools. So they were seeing that the business was still seeing some tools generated, which we were linking back. It's not, the direct outcome, but indirectly, and we're saying, oh, we use this and this and this learning because we learned this from the workshop. This is a tool that you need to do your job better, for example. So maybe we kind of like try to help, or maybe this kind of helped. Again, because we were a team. Yes, this was a social sciences project, but there was also a technical element that was coming from the data science team continuously alongside. And the input that we were having to, like the wider, for example, interest groups within Allianz group that Marisela was also a part of, doing also like the other things that is maybe not necessarily inputting into your research, but indirectly giving you information about, again, like the mechanics of the wider company. So that probably helped. Yeah. For the buy-in from my own side, to, in a way, to selling this project and getting more buy-in and almost recruiting more internal support. That surely helps, because then I can show some tangible outcomes to support.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that I had to really kind of get out of the I'm here as a participant, as a distant observer, into I'm here to do things. Like maybe this is not totally connected to the project, but actually I have something to contribute. So I'm going to sit there and losing kind of like fear of, I don't know what is happening because I'm not an expert in insurance. But doing that, actually, I started to have relationships, and I actually know a lot more about insurance. And I agree with Merve that it's actually quite interesting, isn't it? So, yeah,
I'm telling you.
I'm telling you.
Cool. Maybe one or two more questions before we break?
Yeah, very, very interesting talk. And, you know, I think you've done a great job actually bringing together teams of people who traditionally might not really talk to each other as much as they should. One thing I'm quite interested in is over time how that sort of wider interest in data science and machine learning and AI and so on is in the wider sort of community and sort of employees of Alliance, for example, in this case, and how that has shaped things. Because I would imagine that people are more interested perhaps in getting involved, learning a bit more, even if they don't have the knowledge at the outset, there's that sort of drive to see it, or maybe they've seen results somewhere else. So it starts to sort of propagate a bit more over time. Particularly, you've been there sort of 5 years on this. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It changed a lot. When I joined the team, we had 3 models live. When I say 3 models, it's 3 decision points, like I said. So the business wasn't a total stranger, but it was still at its infancy. And as a team, we actually put a lot of effort in like different educational pieces, but also like increasing the visibility of the team. I mean, basically the size of our team and the credibility that we have to go and do cool things like innovate, research is all like kudos to what has happened earlier on, because those projects proved to be quite impactful in a positive way to the business, to our services. So then, like over the course of 5 years since I've been in Allianz Personal, it became from I kind of can see the value, but I'm still skeptical to like, can we please arrange a call? Can we like please have a conversation to see what we can do together and what you guys can help us to do? So that was a huge change. And to be honest, I see a similar change in the way academic partnerships is treated from like very early on. The more we do it, you obviously see the more benefit. That's why I say actions speak louder than words. It becomes much easier to go and get the buy-in within the company. In terms of like recruiting for interviews, I'm not sure if you've actually seen any change, but I mean, I suppose claims has been the area that we've integrated our models first. So when you joined in, I think they were already a bit ahead in terms of like the business functions, in terms of like understanding and the value added. So they probably knew what to an extent what they want to get out of and what they're getting themselves into. But yeah, back to your question, over the course of 5 years, a massive change in a buy-in, in importance of data science, and not just that, but also the research space. Okay, what's next? What can we do next? Bit cliche, but thinking outside the box side of data science and machine learning practices as well.
Yeah.
I would touch that. I think as well, work like the explainability work really helps drum up attention of the data science team in a way that is accessible to people. So traditionally you'd have us, then maybe we'd work with a couple of technical stakeholders, and then the people further down the value chain wouldn't really understand it, and they wouldn't feel like it was accessible to them because it's all math, I don't get it, fine, whatever. But we're out here saying like, we're not explaining it to you, like that's okay, it's not being explained, and like this is now your opportunity to ask us questions about it. And I think that's meaning that I don't see it so much in claims, because we already have a very like open connection with that. But with pricing, for example, we work with like the technical pricing teams whose job is traditionally to build the models. And then you have like portfolio teams who manage like the portfolio business we have. And we wouldn't traditionally work with the portfolio team. But even in the last like year, I'd say like the interest from them is kind of peaked, because they're like, oh, this explainable thing the claims have got, surely we can have that, and then we can get more involved. And you're like, yeah, cool, you can get more involved. So I think it helps in that way as well.
Great. Well, maybe we should leave it there, but let's give them another round of applause for excellent. I'd like to invite you